Have you ever wondered why Satan fought so hard for Moses' body? Moses is one of the most prominent figures in the Bible, a leader who challenged empires and led a nation. Yet his death and burial are shrouded in mystery. Why do his life and death spark so much interest and controversy? Stay with us as we unravel this fascinating enigma and reveal the hidden secrets behind the fight for Moses' body. Moses is a central figure in the biblical narrative. Born during a period of oppression, his very survival was already a miracle. Rescued from the waters of the Nile, he was raised as a prince in Pharaoh's palace, but his destiny was far from being a mere member of Egyptian royalty. Moses traded the comforts of the palace for the life of a shepherd and later for an even more significant role as a prophet and leader of the Hebrew people. His journey from prince to shepherd and finally to prophet is marked by moments of profound transformation and divine revelation. Moses was chosen by God to free the Hebrews from slavery in Egypt and lead them to the Promised Land. This Herculean mission tested his faith, resilience, and leadership to unimaginable levels. Moses' life is a testament to faith and obedience. From confronting Pharaoh to crossing the Red Sea and receiving the Ten Commandments on Mount Sinai, Moses demonstrated unwavering devotion to God and his purpose. Every stage of his life prepared him for the extraordinary challenges he would face as a leader of God's people. Moses' story is one of redemption and transformation, showing how God can use anyone, regardless of their past, to fulfill his divine plans. Moses' life is a continual inspiration, reminding us that, with faith and obedience, we can overcome any challenge and fulfill the purpose God has for us. Moses' story begins with an act of courage and faith. Born during a period of persecution where Hebrew babies were condemned to death, his mother, Jochebed, made the desperate decision to place him in a basket and leave it in the Nile River. This act of despair and faith resulted in divine intervention. Moses was found and adopted by Pharaoh's daughter, thus growing up in the heart of the empire that had condemned him. Those early years of life in Pharaoh's palace were crucial for Moses' formation. Receiving the education and privileges of an Egyptian prince, he was being prepared for a role he was yet unaware of. However, his true identity as a Hebrew was not forgotten, and this knowledge would be crucial for his destiny. Divine intervention in Moses' survival is a recurring theme in his life. From the moment he was saved from the waters to his calling by God in the burning bush, divine protection and guidance are evident. God had a special plan for Moses, and every event in his life was carefully orchestrated to prepare him for the mission to come. Moses' early years remind us of the power of faith and divine providence. Even in the most desperate circumstances, faith can open paths and provide miracles. His childhood story is a testimony that God is always present, caring for and guiding those who are called to fulfill his purposes. Moses' life was marked by miracles and divine interventions from the start. One of the most emblematic moments of his life was the encounter with God in the burning bush, where he received his mission to free the Hebrews from Egypt. This calling was accompanied by signs and wonders that demonstrated God's power and Moses' authority as his messenger. The miracles performed by Moses were many and varied. From the plagues that struck Egypt, demonstrating God's power over the Egyptian gods, to the parting of the Red Sea, allowing the Hebrews to escape Pharaoh's army, each supernatural act served to consolidate the people's faith and show the supremacy of the God of Israel. In the desert, divine provision continued. God provided manna from heaven to feed the people and water from rocks to quench their thirst. Moses, as an intermediary, was the instrument through which God performed these miracles. His faith and obedience allowed him to accomplish feats that defy human understanding, solidifying his role as a leader chosen by God. Moses' life is a testament to God's power and the importance of faith and obedience. His miracles not only freed a people, but also shaped the faith and identity of the Hebrews as a nation chosen by God. Through the miracles performed by Moses, we can see God's hand operating powerfully and directly in human history. Deuteronomy reports that Moses was 120 years old when he died, but surprisingly, his eyes were not weak, nor had his strength faded. This intriguing detail raises questions about the nature of his death and the continuation of his physical vigor until the end. The Bible describes that no one knows to this day the place of his burial, adding a layer of mystery to his death. Moses' life, marked by so many miraculous events, ends in an equally mysterious way. The absence of a known burial site for Moses contrasts with the common practice of erecting monuments for great leaders. This divine choice to conceal Moses' tomb suggests an intention to preserve the people's focus on faith in God, rather than the veneration of a human leader. Moses' death is wrapped in profound symbolism. His inability to enter the promised land serves as a reminder of the consequences of his actions, but also underlines God's justice and mercy. Moses was allowed to see the promised land, but not enter it, an act that reflects both God's grace in allowing him to see the fruit of his labor and the justice of his actions. The mystery surrounding Moses' death and burial continues to fascinate scholars and believers. He represents the transition of leadership from Moses to Joshua and the continuity of God's divine plan for the people of Israel. Moses' life and death remind us that, in the end, we are all in God's hands, and that the mysteries he leaves behind may contain deep lessons for those who have faith. Moses was not just a human leader. He was a central piece in the cosmic struggle between good and evil. In the grand divine scheme, Moses was a key player. His mission to free the Hebrews from Egypt and guide them to the Promised Land was intrinsically linked to God's plan for humanity's redemption. This plan would culminate in the coming of the Messiah, Jesus Christ, who would be a descendant of the people Moses led. Satan, the eternal adversary of God, saw Moses as a significant threat. If Moses could be stopped, perhaps the divine plan could be thwarted. Satan's resistance to Moses' mission is a reflection of the ongoing battle between the forces of good and evil. Each action by Moses to fulfill God's purpose was a step in defeating Satan's evil plans. Moses' role in the history of salvation shows that each individual has a place in God's larger plan. Even those who feel inadequate or flawed can be used to fulfill divine purposes. Moses' struggle was not just against physical forces, but also against spiritual ones that sought to divert and destroy God's plan. Moses' importance in this cosmic struggle is a reminder that the battles we face on earth often have spiritual ramifications. Moses' faith and obedience, despite his human flaws, exemplify how we must persevere in our own struggle against evil, trusting that God has a greater plan for our lives. Moses was destined to be the liberator of the Hebrews, God's chosen people. His mission was monumental, to take a nation out of slavery in Egypt and guide it to freedom in the Promised Land. This act of liberation was not just physical, but also spiritual, as Moses was paving the way for Israel's future messianic hope. Moses' mission began with a divine call on Mount Horeb, where God appeared to him in the form of a burning bush. With this call came the responsibility to confront Pharaoh and demand the release of the Hebrews. Armed only with his faith and the staff that would become a symbol of many miracles, Moses faced the most powerful empire of the time. Each plague that befell Egypt was a step toward liberation, demonstrating God's power over the Egyptian gods. The crossing of the Red Sea was the culmination of this process, a miracle that not only freed the Hebrews, but also destroyed Pharaoh's army. This monumental event cemented Moses as the great liberator and leader of God's people. Moses' journey as a liberator did not end with the crossing of the Red Sea. In the desert, he continued to guide the people, providing leadership and divine guidance. Moses' mission was a test of his faith and perseverance, and a testament to God's power in freeing and redeeming his people. Despite his extraordinary achievements, Moses could not enter the Promised Land. This fact is one of the most tragic and mysterious aspects of his life. After decades of guiding the Israelites through the desert, facing adversity, and leading with unwavering faith, Moses was prevented from completing his personal journey. The reason for this failure was a specific incident at the waters of Meribah. When the people complained of thirst, God instructed Moses to speak to the rock so that water would flow from it. In a moment of frustration, Moses, instead of speaking, struck the rock twice with his staff. Although the water flowed, Moses' action was seen as a lack of faith and obedience to God. God then declared that Moses would not enter the promised land. This moment was a turning point, showing that even the greatest leaders are not exempt from the consequences of their actions. Moses' frustration, understandable from a human standpoint, underlined the importance of precise obedience to divine instructions. Despite his failure, Moses was not abandoned by God. He was allowed to see the promised land from afar, from Mount Nebo, but not to enter. This paradoxical end to his journey is a lesson about God's justice and mercy, showing that he fulfills his promises even when human leaders fail. The incident at the waters of Meribah was one of the most critical moments in Moses' life. The people of Israel, thirsty and desperate, began to complain against Moses and Aaron. In response, Moses sought God's guidance, who instructed him to take the staff and speak to the rock before the people's eyes, so that water would flow from it. However, moved by frustration and perhaps the pressure of the moment, Moses did not follow God's instructions exactly. Instead of speaking to the rock, he struck it twice with his staff. Although the water flowed, allowing the people to quench their thirst, this act of disobedience had grave consequences for Moses. God said to Moses, "Because you did not trust in me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land I give them." This was a moment of great sadness and reflection for Moses. His anger and disobedience, even if momentary, cost him entry into the promised land. The waters of Meribah teach us about the importance of obedience and total trust in God. Even when we are under pressure or facing frustration, we must remember to follow divine instructions precisely. This incident is a reminder that our actions have consequences and that faith and obedience are crucial in our walk with God. Moses' death is shrouded in mystery, especially regarding his burial. The Bible tells us that Moses died in the land of Moab according to the word of the Lord, and that God himself took care of his burial. However, no one knows to this day the exact location where Moses was buried. This burial without a monument is quite unusual, especially for a leader of such magnitude. In many cultures, great leaders are honored with elaborate tombs and memorials. In Moses' case, however, God chose to hide the location of his tomb. This may have been a measure to prevent the tomb from becoming a site of idolatry. The absence of a known tomb also underscores the humility that Moses often demonstrated in his life. He was a faithful servant of God, whose greatest glory was fulfilling the divine purpose and not receiving earthly honors. This final act of God in hiding Moses' tomb can be seen as an extension of this humility and devotion. The mystery of Moses' burial continues to fascinate scholars and believers. It reminds us that, in the end, we are all in God's hands. Moses' story, including the enigma of his tomb, challenges us to focus more on our faith and obedience to God than on earthly honors. His legacy remains not in a physical monument, but in the lives and faith of the people he led. After Moses' death, a supernatural dispute arose over his body. The Epistle of Jude, one of the smallest books of the New Testament, mentions this mysterious event. Even the archangel Michael, when disputing with the devil about the body of Moses, did not dare to condemn him for slander, but said, "The Lord rebuke you." This brief verse raises more questions than answers and has been the subject of much theological speculation. The presence of Satan in this dispute indicates Moses' importance in the divine plan. Satan, always seeking ways to thwart God's purposes, saw an opportunity in Moses' body. It is believed that by attempting to claim the body, Satan could dishonor Moses' legacy and potentially turn his tomb into an object of idolatry, diverting the people's focus from God to Moses. The Archangel Michael, known as a powerful warrior of God and defender of the faith, intervened. Instead of engaging in a direct argument with Satan, Michael used God's authority to rebuke him. This action underscores the importance of relying on divine authority when facing evil, rather than depending on our own strength. This episode reminds us of the ongoing battle between good and evil, which extends beyond our physical perception. The dispute over Moses' body highlights the seriousness with which Satan tries to subvert God's plans, but also the divine protection that is always present for those who are faithful. The exact reasons why Satan wanted Moses' body remain a mystery, but several theological interpretations offer possible explanations. One theory is that Satan wanted to desecrate Moses' body, thus dishonoring the great prophet's legacy and, by extension, God himself. By disrespecting what was sacred to God, Satan could claim a symbolic victory. Another interpretation suggests that Satan wanted to turn Moses' body into an object of idolatry. Moses was revered by the Israelites, and Satan could have seen the potential to divert God's people by having them worship Moses' body instead of God himself. This idolatry would be a significant deviation from the people's spiritual focus, something Satan constantly seeks to provoke. Moses' presence at Jesus' transfiguration alongside Elijah also suggests that he was elevated to heaven. Satan could have tried to prevent this testimony of God's power over death. Moses' resurrection and elevation are powerful symbols of divine victory over sin and death, something Satan desperately wants to discredit. Regardless of the exact reason, the dispute over Moses' body highlights the spiritual importance of this biblical figure. Moses' life, his mission, and even his body were valuable not only for Israel's history, but also in the spiritual battle between God and Satan. One of the most significant events involving Moses after his death is his appearance at Jesus' transfiguration. In the New Testament, we read that Moses appeared alongside Elijah, talking with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration. This event is a powerful testimony of resurrection and the continuity of life after death. Moses' presence at the Transfiguration is symbolically rich. He represents the law, while Elijah represents the prophets. Together, they converse with Jesus, who fulfills both the law and the prophecies. This vision not only reinforces Jesus' authority, but also validates Moses' role in the history of salvation. The Transfiguration shows that Moses, despite his flaws and the mysterious dispute over his body, was honored by God. His presence alongside Jesus suggests that he was elevated to heaven, enjoying eternal life in God's presence. This event gives a new perspective to the dispute over Moses' body, indicating that, regardless of Satan's intentions, the divine plan prevailed. For Christians, the Transfiguration is a reminder of the promise of resurrection and eternal life. Moses, as a forerunner of Jesus, points to the hope all believers have in victory over death and eternal life with God. This event inspires faith and confidence in God's redemptive power, which transcends even death. The story of the dispute over Moses' body highlights the reality of the spiritual battle that occurs beyond our perception. Satan, as the accuser and adversary, continuously seeks ways to thwart God's plans and divert the faithful. However, the Archangel Michael's intervention and God's ultimate victory remind us of the importance of faith and vigilance. Moses' faith, demonstrated throughout his life, is a powerful example of trusting God even amid challenges and failures. His life teaches us that faith is not the absence of mistakes, but perseverance in trusting God and seeking His will. Even when we face moments of weakness, like Moses at the waters of Meribah, we should remember to return to God and seek His guidance. The spiritual battle also calls us to vigilance. Moses' story and the dispute over his body warn us of Satan's tricks, who tries to use even sacred elements to divert God's people. We must always be attentive, firm in our faith, and confident in divine authority to resist spiritual temptations and attacks. The importance of faith and vigilance is underscored by Michael's response to Satan, "The Lord rebuke you." This example teaches us that our strength comes from God, and it is in His name that we find protection and victory. Moses' story is a reminder that, in the spiritual battle, our trust must always be in the Lord. Moses' life and death are filled with profound and inspiring lessons. From his miraculous childhood to his extraordinary leadership and mysterious burial, Moses exemplifies faith, obedience, and the importance of fulfilling the divine purpose. His story is a testament to God's power in using flawed individuals to achieve great things. Moses teaches us about the importance of faith and obedience. Despite his human flaws, he was a faithful leader who followed God's instructions and guided the people of Israel in times of extreme difficulty. His life is an example of how trust in God can overcome any obstacle and how obedience is crucial to fulfilling the divine will. The dispute over Moses' body reminds us of the reality of the spiritual battle. This mysterious event underscores the importance of remaining vigilant and trusting in God's authority in all circumstances. Michael's response to Satan teaches us that victory over evil comes from God, and it is in His name that we find our strength and protection. Finally, Moses' presence at Jesus' transfiguration gives us hope in resurrection and eternal life. Moses' life, from his miraculous birth to his elevation to heaven, points to the promise of redemption and final victory over death. His story inspires us to persevere in faith, confident that God has a plan for each of us and that in His hands we find our true purpose and destiny. If you found Moses' story and the mysteries surrounding his life and death fascinating, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to our channel for more intriguing and profound content. Share this video with your friends and family so they too can explore the secrets and lessons of the Bible. Leave your comments below with your interpretations and thoughts on the dispute over Moses' body. See you next time, and remember, keep your faith strong and vigilant against the enemy's tricks.